Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this executive member decision session. And it is Tuesday, the 27th of January. I would really like to welcome everybody who's either watching or here in the room with us today. We have a huge array of people that have joined us and braved the weather, so thank you for that. So going to the agenda, then apologies for absence, we have none. Appointing a chair, sorry, I should have done that first. And I'll just explain why we appoint a chair. It's because any executive members who need to make a decision come to this session, and the chair will pass between the executive members who are associated with a particular decision. And so I propose that I am chair to start the meeting. Can I see if that's seconded and approved? Yeah, so we're all in favour of that. So I will chair the meeting to start off with. And I'm Councillor Claire Douglas. I'm leader of the council and executive member for policy, strategy and partnerships. So apologies, we have none. Declarations of interest. Do we have any? No, none on that either. Thank you, everybody. The minutes, item number 4 is minutes to approve and sign the minutes of the combined executive member decision session held on 2nd of December 2025. Does anybody have anything on those minutes? Can I see those who are approve those? It's a fair reflection. You don't need to have been here in order to do that because the attendance does change. So I will sign those and hand them to you, Reese. Okay, thank you. The next item, item number 5, is public participation. And today we have 5 speakers, four speakers. The first person on our list today is Councillor Waller, who has just come into the room, and he would like to speak on items 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 and 13. If you'd like to come to the table, please, Councillor Waller, and you have 3 minutes. Would you like me to give you a 30-second warning, or are you okay?
Yes, Chair, if you give me a 30-second warning, and in recognition of the 3 minutes, I will stick to the housing matters and take the other matters up outside this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Right, off you go.
Chair.
Thank you.
There was a time when every tenant in every estate could see improvements happening in the area where they lived as a result of decisions that they were part of. This is no longer the case. And whilst regeneration of one part of the city with £250,000 is no doubt welcomed by that community, there were other ways in which that resource could have been found. But I'm concerned that the link between residents and West offices is being broken. And this is one example of this happening. Estate improvement funds come from rents. And however you label it, it used to be HEAP, it's now NIP. It's vital that people living in our estates feel that they are involved in the prioritisation of works to improve the areas in which they live. It's democracy. I've been asking the executive member since May 2023 how the replacement for HEAP would operate. This is the first time we've seen specific proposals. And I'm sorry to say that this report ignores the recommendations raised by the People's Scrutiny Committee, which raised questions about the way in which this council functions. I've personally been on 5 estate walkabouts since October, and these have yet to see the agreed outcomes delivered: Ascot Way, Windsor Garth, Cornlands Road, St Stephen's Road, Chapel Fields and Foxwood. Involving people who live in the estates with the work that can be delivered with this funding is important. People need to feel that they have some say over the decisions being made, and this also goes for the antisocial behaviour policy. The consequence of these actions make significant impact on the quality of life and communities need to feel that there is a consistent approach by the council. Having a single point of contact within the same estate is something that is frequently raised with me, but it's not referenced in this report, despite it being a significant cause for casework. Questions are being asked why it appears that persistent behaviour appears not to result in consequences.
You have 30 seconds.
Therefore, I would raise concerns that as a member of People Scrutiny, that the input from scrutiny is not being felt in these reports, and therefore I would urge you to amend them accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waller, and I'm sure Councillor Pavlovic will respond to you slightly better in writing, or when you take the chair over, Councillor Pavlovic, to respond to that. But I have to say that I was only the other day talking to a tenant who was really championing the involvement of tenant scrutiny and the tenants in the kind of direction of where the improvements are happening, and that was in my local community. So I'd hope that that's reflected and people are given the opportunity to participate as they would are able to and choose to. And also just on Councillor Waller's points around his walkabouts, we now have the neighbourhood caretakers, of course, and those have been really successful. So I hope that we can help Westfield to benefit more from those as well, and I'm sure they will do. So thank you for that, Councillor Waller. Next on our list, we have Jocelyn Proctor, who would like to speak on item number 12. So Jocelyn, if you would like to take a seat up at the end of the table. Is Oisin going to go with you as well? Yes, okay, great. So you have 3 minutes, Jocelyn. Would you like me to give you a 30-second warning? Okay, thank you for joining us. And you need to turn the mic on, and it's the second button from the left mic. It needs to go green so that we... Yeah, great. Thank you very much. So I'll give you 30 seconds. Off you go.
Is it, yeah, is that okay now? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so I want to first thank the ancestors that opened the way for us to live this time of reconciliation and systemic change. I as well want to thank my elders from York Racial Equality Network who pioneered supporting hate crime victims in York and still do with a friendship space. My name is Jocelyn Proctor, and I am a Purepecha Otomi Nahuatl and Northern Irish single mother. Being an advocate of Indigenous science and regenerative design for most of my life, I found myself to be the person who required support. My journey from domestic violence, homelessness, and exposure to nuisance odors and hate crime due to my ethnicity and mental health has made me find many gaps in care for this intersectionality, but as well, and overall, the human beings that have chosen to be kind in their duty of care. A key element when you are a victim is validation, and I have had an inconsistent experience where on one side a police officer invalidates me and the other does. On my current complaint on how a mediator from Restorative Solutions handled my case, where although she couldn't engage other parties, she writes a bias report where my boss is omitted, and conversation where she kept saying that racism didn't happen, this has caused me even further trauma. On the other hand, there is a wider ecosystem that has supported my family, and it goes from housing services, especially housing repairs team, maternity services, community mental health team, local area coordinators, counselors, town hall, community center, and the York Minster. This has given me a sense of belonging and community ownership. And in reciprocity, I volunteer in co-production of mental health services, co-chair the parent panel with Race York, the children's ministry in the Minster, and the tenants voice panel, which is one of those spaces where any person, any tenant is able to come and participate, even promote and provide ideas, not only going through policies, but any idea, anything back. There's as well that open space with, I participate in the neighborhood walks. I can come today to say that there was a direct improvement in my community, which I've reported back to Claire Douglas and Councillor Bob Webb. And although I have the option to flee again, I have decided to stay, as I truly believe that the practice of removing the victim is sometimes inevitable, but this strengthens and enables antisocial behavior. This tool of the new policy that provides clear guidelines for housing officers and the ecosystemic approach
You have
for
30
hotspots
seconds, Jocelyn.
can transform communities to be safe and harmonious. This is why the strategy of regenerative partnerships of this antisocial behavior strategy will create a just space for people where there is a balance between the opportunity of each part of the ecosystem to thrive. We only need a network of kindness and hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Jocelyn, and thank you for sharing your experiences with us today. I really appreciate it. Our next speaker is Councillor Fenton, and he wants to speak on items 11 and 13. And so you have 3 minutes. Councillor, would you like me to give you a 30-second
Yes, please.
warning? Yes, okay, right, please go ahead.
Thanks, Chair, and good morning, colleagues. At the People Scrutiny Committee on the 3rd of December, members were able to undertake pre-decision scrutiny on the draft tenancy policy and strategy ahead of today's decision session, and that was welcome. It's disappointing that the draft ASB policy and the damp and mould policy were not brought to the same meeting for review. Had these items appeared on the forward plan earlier, scrutiny would have at least been cited on those proposals and could have asked for them to come to a decision session or sought some other way to have input. I welcome the reports and support much of what's proposed, but would point out that many councillors do deal with a large volume of housing-related casework. So I would ask that their input is sought in addition to tenant voice, which obviously is at the forefront of engagement. On the ASB paper, a couple of questions that jumped out of at me from reading is whether there's sufficient resource within their housing team to implement the approach as envisaged, and also how housing officers and others will tap into councillors' community knowledge and how that information can be shared, not just with housing, but with police colleagues as well. Councillors do have a role in our communities, so it'd be useful if that's acknowledged in the report and can be made good use of. On the damp and mould policy, there's a reference to the role that condensation plays in creating the environment for mould to occur. Just one thing I'd add from my experience, it talks about tiles, windows, walls, ceilings. In many council homes, mould on the ceiling indicates a lack of roof insulation, and that's something that can be addressed fairly quickly and fairly easily. So it'd be useful to bring that out explicitly in the policy. Finally, the Neighbourhood Improvement Programme. I spoke at Executive I think it was in June last year, and welcomed the statement in that report that further details on the Neighbourhood Improvement Programme would be included in the Neighbourhood Model Report to be considered by Executive. There was a Neighbourhood Model discussion at scrutiny, I think it was People Scrutiny in October of last year, where Councillor Pavlovic fielded a range of questions from members, and that was a really useful exchange. Councillor Pavlovic said that
30 seconds.
Residents and councillors have the opportunity to identify schemes within their communities. In my experience, there is no process to underpin that. So I think that is critical to get that right. When I ask housing officers about improvements such as cutting back overhanging branches, which are making a drying area unusable, I'm told there's no budget for that. So there are roadblocks that we can hopefully try and overcome. All tenants have the right to expect neighbourhood improvements, not just residents in certain areas.
That's
After
3
all,
minutes.
it's their money.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your comments, and I'm sure that they will be picked up in the policy and also when Councillor Pavlovic speaks on the item. And then finally, today we have Gwen Swinburne, who would like to speak on items 8, 10, 11, 12 and 13. And you have 3 minutes. Do you need me to give you a 30?
No, I don't care, but I'm only going to speak on the communication strategy. Is there somebody here from that department?
Yes.
You, thank you.
Right, please go ahead. 3 minutes.
Thank you. One theme that runs throughout the communications engagement strategy is this engagement with the so-called hard to reach communities. The Groves is not hard to reach. It is a clearly defined place with known streets, known businesses, a visible community association and advocates. It is also one of the city's most deprived areas, with many struggling small and ethnic minority-owned businesses that depend on day-to-day footfall. Yet in an ongoing statutory process affecting the Groves, officers were clearly unaware where the Groves even was. Engagement materials were delivered across far parts of the city, nowhere near the Groves, and unbeknown to us. A full month behind other areas, leaflets were finally delivered to just 8 businesses and 7 institutions in the Groves. In other words, 85% of our businesses were ignored and still are. By the way, no one told us even that these leaflets were being delivered. This is a failure to recognise, prioritise, or even communicate with our deprived community and our ward members at the outset and ever since. For our businesses, this was not an abstract consultation. Parking charges changed significantly overnight without warning. Unlike in Micklethwaite and Bishy Road, left the Groves paying £5 an hour. This matters because strategies like this have value. If they change what happens to on the ground. When engagement is late, partial, or based on incorrect assumptions, the language of inclusion offers little reassurance to those affected. Here's another example. Last year on the rates consultation, one question was, should we raise car parking prices for tourists to pay for your services you need? What an outrageous question. You only had around 614 responses, 55% were in agreement. You then did focus groups, only 13% were in agreement, but somehow reported only the 55% figure. So just 2 of many examples, Chair, where trust and confidence in CYC comms is at a very low level. Chair, aspiration is great, but the Council simply is not in a position to achieve best in class in a year. Whatever strategies are defined, for once, please, why not under-promise and over-deliver? And remember, please, if you don't communicate, you won't communicate. Sorry to be so stiff, Chair.
Thank you for your comments. I'm sure they'll be considered in the item about communications and engagement. Thank you very much for joining us today. Right, then let's move on then to the next item, which is item number 6, which is the communications and engagement strategy. And we have Mike James, who is head of communications engagement, here to introduce the paper. And it comes under my portfolio area as leader of the council and executive member for strategy, policy and partnerships. Mike, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. So the strategy sets out how the council will use communications and engagement to support what the organisation does and also how it does it, as we've just been talking about. And that's because using communications in the right way supports lots of key things that we do as an organisation. If we get it right, it helps us to develop effective policy. It helps us to directly support how services are delivered. It can help support community cohesion as well, which is obviously an increasing issue for lots of reasons beyond our immediate control. It can encourage people to take certain actions, behaviour change actions, for example, with public health priorities, as an example of that. And it can directly support the efficiency and effectiveness of the organisation as well. There is a lot of evidence to show there's a clear link between good workforce communications and innovation and productivity as we face our financial challenges in the future. And there is a statutory duty for this as well. We have a duty to support and sometimes lead communications within a civil emergency situation. So it isn't just a nice to have, but it's a statutory requirement. So the strategy sets out how we want to use communications resource to do those things. It aligns to the council plan and to the long-term ambitions of the city. It gives us frameworks to deal with identifying particular groups in particular communities, as we've just been talking about. So it gives us the way of improving those things across the board. It's built from a review that was carried out in the early part of 2025 about the communication service and how it operates, and also from national best practice as well, from organisations such as the Local Government Association. We've been trialling the approaches within that over the first part of 2025, and this document seeks to embed those things into a strategy for the organisation over the next 2 years, sets out what we want to do, why we want to do it, and how we want to do it. So the recommendation today, Chair, is to adopt the strategy to enable us to deliver that for the organisation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for that introduction. And can you just outline the member engagement in the strategy as well, please, over a period of time?
Yeah, absolutely. So we took the draft strategy to scrutiny back in the beginning of October. There are a number of issues that were raised there. So there was some, the key points from that were around recognising non-digital audiences as well. So those were not as easy to access information online. A focus on making sure that we understood channels for younger audiences, and alignment to things like our customer services priorities as well. So all of those things are now baked into the strategy from the feedback from that session.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I think that the member involvement was particularly helpful, wasn't it, in ironing out some of the issues that we know still persist. And it is an ongoing and ever-moving challenge communicating with the city in a way that is effective and responsive to changes in people's habits and how they absorb and find information. But also, unfortunately, as always, we are doing this within a budget that must be adhered to as well. And it's finding the appropriate balance. But we're always open to suggestions on how it can be improved. And so scrutiny is a fantastic way of that input coming from different directions, and also public participation when our residents come and speak to us. So the recommendations for the communications and engagement strategy that we're very keen to get implemented as soon as possible, and hence here it is today, are on page 19. And it says there, under paragraph 9, that the leader of the council was asked to adopt the communications and engagement strategy to ensure the council can use its communications resources in the most effective way to support the organisation's priorities and ambitions, and B, to ensure the council focuses on relevant communication and engagement with all communities across the city in a fair and equitable way. So I am more than happy to approve those recommendations and see this come through into action and implementation. But as has been highlighted already, that there is always more that can be done, and we need to learn every time that we do major and small communications, and make sure that we attempt to do it in a more a way that better reflects people's needs, requirements, and those specific communities. So I'd like to thank you and all the work that's gone in for this, and the communications and engagement strategy is approved. Thank you very much. So at this point then, I will hand over to Councillor Kent, who is going to chair for item number 7. So thank you very much, Councillor Kent. And I will be leaving the meeting now. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas. So I'd like to introduce item 7, which is adapting the management of the bar walls, ramparts to maximise ecological value, sustainability and aesthetic appeal. And I have Dave Atkinson and Liam Dennis here to talk us through that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm bringing forward a report today which seeks the approval for a change in the management of the ecology of the bar wall ramparts to promote sustainability, biodiversity and aesthetic improvements. The proposal would be to identify suitable sites for a revised management plan and develop tailored site-specific methodologies that reflect both the heritage and the ecological needs of those areas. We see the principal benefits of a change in approach as increasing the biodiversity in a key urban green space, improving the sustainability of the management approaches and supporting our move towards net zero, enhancing the visitor and resident experience of the bar walls, opening up opportunities to work with partners and local residents and volunteering to reduce the burden on the public realm resources while we make these improvements, and to build a strong relationship between the monument and the residents that live close to it. There will obviously be some challenges with a changed in approach, climate change being a key one. I think last year we saw the effect of unprecedented levels of dryness over the spring and heat over the summer, which just highlights how important it is to have improved sustainability and resilient planning strategies across most of the city's public realm. Managing the expectations of residents and visitors. This will be a change. I think when you look at what we did last year on Station Rise, which was our first pilot project, that area saw a very wholesale change to the planting approach. We were able to do this because of the uniquely sterile ecology and archaeology of that site. That isn't going to be the blueprint for what we do elsewhere. That is very much a response to that being a key vista across the city and a key backdrop that we needed to make aesthetically stunning, which I think we managed to achieve last year. And obviously the reliance on volunteers, we can't always expect them to be available to us. So anything that we do needs to be reversible if necessary, if those opportunities don't arise. We're making this decision in the context of Historic England's advice on how to manage the ecology of historic sites, which takes into account the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, and seeks to be a more affordable way of delivering these changes and the management of the city walls by use of volunteers, by being able to get external funding from grant organisations such as the National Lottery, such as the BIFRA Awards, such as the UK Biodiversity Funds. So with all that said, we hope that the report is taken forward and that we are able to undertake some of these trial site locations and work on the improvements to the biodiversity, sustainability and the aesthetics of the bar walls.
Thank you, Liam. Dave, did you want to add anything?
Only a great piece of work by Liam and the team. I think it really takes us forward in terms of our low ramparts. So really supportive of it from my perspective, yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely. I want to thank you personally, Liam, and also your colleague Ben Reeves for the huge amount of sensitivity and hard work that you put into this in order to primarily protect our heritage walls. They're a huge part of our city, our medieval heritage, but also to ensure that we're actually meeting the challenges of sustainability across the city and in a way which was so fantastically received. And alongside that, I want to thank all the volunteers because this was a genuine citywide effort. It included local businesses, our universities, our volunteers, York Cares, residents, councillors, everybody across the city. And it was a fantastic piece of partnership work. And it also showed how much people want to take action to meet the climate change challenges we have and to make our city more sustainable and more beautiful. So our walls are known for their iconic daffodils in spring. And the other part of this, which I really love, is that this is our opportunity to spread that burst of joy, not just from March when it's grey and needed, but across the whole season. And last year, partly due to the changing seasons and the changing climate, we had blooms of all sorts of different colours from July right the way through to December. It was almost a shame to have to cut them back in December, but the frosts were coming. But we want to extend that joy and colour throughout the year. This is a really vital area. It's 9 hectares, I think I'm right in saying, of green corridor, which hugs the city. It surrounds our city, and it's vital for us, but it's equally vital for all the species that we need to support. And we know that there's been a precipitous decline in biodiversity across the world. And so York doing its part in this 9 hectare hug around the city is just fantastic. So I am very happy to support this. I want to thank everyone involved. I can't wait to see the different forms of native planting in different areas of the city. And I endorse paragraph 18, which is option 1, and approve this report. Yes, let's get on with it. Great, thank you. So at this point, I think I'm handing over the chair to Councillor Webb for items 8 and 9. Thank you.
Sounds about right. Just let everybody shift around for a moment and then we'll settle in. You would. Okay, hello everybody. Rachel, Claire. We're going to start on item 8. Item 8 is the admission arrangements for 2027-28 school year. So if you guys would like to start on that, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is the decision report for the coordinated admission arrangements for admissions for 2027-28. So the report seeks the approval of the admission policies and published admission numbers for community and voluntary controlled school, for whom City of York Council are the admissions authority. It also seeks the approval for the coordinated admission schemes for City of York area, for which the City of York Council is the coordinating local authority. And again, both of those are for applications to start school September 2027. It also seeks a decision as to whether to support, not support, or remain impartial for any amendments to admission arrangements for multi-academy trusts who are their own admission authority. So the recommendations are that the proposed changes to the admission arrangements for September 2027 should be accepted and supported on the basis of the options analysis and evidential basis shown in the report. So the key points to note is that it is the duty of the admission authority to carry out consultation each year on the admission arrangements where these have changed, or at least once every 7 years. So this year we do have some changes. We have consulted every year in the past. It is something that we are looking to review, but because we do have some fundamental changes, we are reviewing those admission arrangements. So in the case of maintained schools, the admission authority is the local authority, whilst for voluntary aided or academy schools, it is the governing body or the academy trust of the school. So we held a consultation as is required in line with the school admissions policy 2021. Now we did have the admission policies for all of the multi-academy trusts, so it was coordinated. You will note from the paper that there were 2 trusts that were unable to be in the consultation at the same time, but the information for that was included within our own. So the key points to note for changes are the published admission numbers. So we are looking to approve the change of the published admission number of Clifton Green Primary School from 45 to 30 pupils, and also the reduction in the published admission number for Headlands Primary School, again from 40 to 30 pupils. In addition to the PAN changes, and in line with City of York Council and York School and Academies Board, we are looking at a policy change relating to the Sutton Trust and an initiative which is called Fair School Admissions. So you can see in point 57 that the proposed oversubscription criteria would prioritise pupils who are eligible for pupil premium or service pupil premium over those who are not eligible for either of the premiums, for whom distance would have previously been a criteria. That is an initiative which all of the multi-academy trusts are looking to adopt and will determine within their own admission arrangements when their determination process is completed. So those are the significant changes within the admission arrangements that we are seeking for approval today.
Thank you, Rachel. So yeah, I think that on this point, there's a couple of key things really. I think one very much is the essentially the birth rate in York is such that we are in a position where in some schools we are making the choice to sensibly manage numbers in order to help facilitate better budgets. Really, that's essentially what's happening here. And so we should really clearly note, obviously, what's happening at Clifton Green and Headlands, but to be honest, it's not exceptional. This is something that every year it comes back to us, and there's changes like this that happen. So I think that's worth pointing out there. The other part of this is around that, the last point you finished on there, around a policy change around the fairer school admissions. A lot of what you've said today, Rachel, is that the local authority, we obviously decide what we do for the maintained schools. However, we listen and advise and support and usually agree with our multi-academy trusts. What the local authority is doing here, and this is a really good example of us being a convening body. I think the power of our local authorities, we still have a very good relationship with our trusts, which is not necessarily the case in a lot of parts of the country. And through that, we've been able to work with York Schools and Academies boards to develop and implement the Sutton Trust's Fair School Admissions Pledge. And the idea behind this is that essentially, if you come from a disadvantaged background, you have a bit more of a priority, not a lot, but a bit more of a priority than you used to in order to get into particular schools. That has to be better in order to help our young people get to the best place for them for learning. And key to that, of course, is we do have a disadvantaged attainment gap in this city. And this is just another way in which that we've come together as schools to tackle that issue. So that's a really positive step forward. I'm very happy to approve this paper. Yes, let's make those changes as necessary and move on. Thank you. Approved. So we now move on to the second one of my items. So allow for a little bit of shifting around again. Oh, they brought their own place this time. Don't throw it at us, don't. Okay. Lovely. Right. Okay. So the second item that I've got on this paper is the annual Childcare Sufficiency Assessment 2025. Dawn and Kerry are here to introduce this and talk to this paper. Over to you.
Again. Thank you for letting me present this report and giving an update on childcare sufficiency across the city and raising the profile of our childcare. So my name is Dawn Ward. I'm Early Years and Childcare Programme Reforms Lead.
I'm Kerry Lee and I'm the wraparound project officer.
So just for clarity, because I know that there's sometimes confusion when we talk about early years, that's children 0 to 4 years. And Kerry leads on wraparound, and wraparound covers school-age childcare, which is usually breakfast, after school and holiday childcare. So the childcare sufficiency assessment is required on an annual basis to ensure local authorities are meeting their statutory duty under the Childcare Act to provide sufficient quality, flexible and affordable childcare and ensuring places are available for free early education entitlements. Childcare sufficiency duty also supports the city's wider ambition for economic growth. Hopefully the report is clear and concise and shows a picture of York's childcare landscape. So the report highlights that the local authority is meeting its statutory duty currently to ensure that there are sufficient places across the city to allow families to work and take up their early years entitlements. However, there are some wards where there are potential pressures moving forwards, and we're taking a measured approach to creating additional places where they are required, but also ensuring accessibility, choice and flexibility for families and supporting sustainability of our already established market. Capital funding provided by the DfE is being used to support the creation of additional places where data suggests that we have a longer term need for those places. We're also developing additional capacity within our early years sector through our developer contributions section 106 and using the school-based nursery programme which DfE launched in 2025. So a few key headlines from the report. We have 189 providers across the city, delivering 3,829 early years places. The sufficiency picture of early years has remained quite consistent over the past 2 years, with vacancy rates remaining around 20 to 23% currently across the city. Before and after school places continue to grow in the city, with 2,321 places available for after school and 2,003 places for breakfast. One school was successful in the last academic year with their application for school-based nursery funding. That was Poppleton Road School. And York remains in a strong position. And at the time that the report was put together, we had 100% good and outstanding within our early years sector for their offset outcomes. However, to note that historical underfunding of the early years and childcare sector and the current economic climate is a concern. And therefore, some of our key actions and priorities moving forward are that we ensure that we collect that termly occupancy data to make sure that we've got an accurate, up-to-date picture of our childcare sector at all times, so that we're able to act quickly, swiftly, if we have any closures within the sector. We continue to promote the business support offer to ensure that our sector is robust and fit for the future. We support any schools with their school-based nursery application. We've currently got one school that's in round 2 of their application, and we're awaiting their outcome. We continue to work within the wraparound programme parameters to develop places where they're required, and we're providing long-term sustainability support to ensure that the sector remains robust. We continue to improve access for children with SEND, both in the early years and the wraparound, to make sure that those children can access their places. We're working with the DWP to ensure that we support people back into our sector, because we know we've got a recruitment crisis within our sector. And we're promoting the early years entitlements as widely as we can. At the very bottom of the childcare sufficiency assessment on Appendix 4 is information regarding 2 funding streams that were allocated to us. One is the National Wraparound Programme funding, and we've successfully created 441 places across the city using the wraparound funding. It has actually increased since the time of the report. And through the capital expansion funding, we've increased capacity by 24 places using that capital funding. The recommendation is just that the report is accepted. There are no kind of decision making. It's just that the report, so that we can publish and send a copy over to DFE if the report's agreed.
Thank you, Dawn. Kerry, have you got anything specific you want to add?
No, I think it's good enough.
Okay. Yeah, I think that part of this report, and Councillor Pavlik, stop loitering, come and sit down. No, it's all right, come and join us. Part of this report is really about, obviously, we went through a full executive last year when the government first introduced increased funding for childcare for wraparound provision. Part of this is actually getting into the detail of what we've then done with that money and what's happened. And I just want to really extend my thanks to Dawn, to Kerry for their hard work in what has been a really, really quite changeable landscape very recently. There's been a lot of work going on, and it makes a big, big difference. So your expertise is absolutely valued and really, really welcome. A few of the key things, I mean, the government's Best Start in Life strategy, it brings opportunities for the childcare sector through a focus on increased access to good quality childcare, with an emphasis on workforce development. And I totally note what you said about the issues around that. It is a hard job, really hard job, and it should be paid better, and I'll put that on record. And I think that that's something that we need to almost go back to government with and say, look, this is part of the reason that we're having a problem in a city like York, very expensive place to live. Carrying on with that sort of theme of cost of living, you know, in the spring 23 budget, the Chancellor announced transformative reforms to childcare for working parents. Part of that then followed on was the access to 33 hours for 9 month plus. That is a game changer for a lot of parents, just that reduction in cost of childcare provision, and that will make a big difference to those families' lives. One thing I want to note through the benefits of childcare beyond those workplace benefits for parents is, you know, having that access to childcare for a child, having the ability for them to be around other children, to be around professionals who help them with that development is absolutely key. In York, because we're so good and we've got such a good reputation and we've been doing so well over time, the normal good level of development level at 75% was not good enough for York, so we were given a higher target of 79%, which I'm really confident that we're going to do really great at. All right, but that only happens through good quality childcare and support for those families and support for those littlest children. As many of you know, I'm a secondary science teacher, and I've been told several times recently that essentially a child's brain is pretty much 95% of the way there by the time they're 5. Me teaching physics at 18-year-olds, I mean, it's almost, what's the point, eh? But, you know, we do our best. York has received increased funding from this, 284,000 in the report, as an expansion grant distributed in full to eligible providers. Again, we've met that deadline. Well done for getting that done. We've had a primary school successful in expanding what they want to offer through capital grants, again, providing more places. So York is in a really, really good position because of increased funding from government. But if I'm honest, probably more important than that is the hard work of you guys in this council and the work of the sector out there in York. We've done really well. Keep it up. I approve this. I don't need to make a decision, but you know, I approve. It's good. Let's keep doing what we're doing and keep going forward. Thank you very much for your work. And now I hand over to Councillor Pavlovic for the rest of the meeting, I believe. And on that happy note, I will love you and leave you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. And before that, Councillors Kent and Douglas. Well, we've had a very wide-ranging exec member decision session today, covering a lot of different areas. And the last 4 items are relating to housing and tenancies. And I'm just wondering, given that we've had members of the public and councillors prepared to give us their time, do you want to come and sit at the table, Councillor Waller and Jocelyn? Yeah. Because I am incredibly grateful, certainly for all the comments that I've received today, and I hope we'll be able to address them when we get to the agenda items. And she's probably going to talk more sense than I do. So the first agenda item we've got is the tenancy policy and strategy, which starts on page 517 of our papers today. And I'm very much happy to welcome Pauline Stutchfield, who is the Director of Housing and Communities, and Andrew Bebbington, who is going to be talking on these items, who's the Housing Development Coordinator. Pauline, I'll hand over to you, and then where you lead, I will follow.
Thank you, Chair. I'll introduce each of the reports in turn as you take your decision. So the first one, as you said, is the Housing Tenancy Policy and Strategy. Tenancy strategy sets the overall expectations for social landlords in the city to take into account respective details in their own tenancy policies. So it's an umbrella strategy, if you like. It is an expectation of the regulator for social housing that social landlords have in place an up-to-date tenancy policy. The role of the tenancy policy is to set out what types of tenancy City of York itself will issue, alongside related matters around succession, mutual exchange, joint tenancies, and similar decisions. This report outlines a proposed tenancy policy and strategy for the City of York, as I say, to set the standard for the city for other social housing providers. The report outlines the requirements of the policy set down by the regulator and consultation undertaken. And as you've heard, we consult with our tenants on each of our policies and strategies going forward. It guides, the policy guides local registered providers on, firstly, the kinds of tenancies they grant, secondly, the circumstances in which they will grant a tenancy of a particular kind, thirdly, whether they grant tenancies for a term, the length of the terms, and finally, the circumstances in which they grant a further tenancy.
on the coming to an end of an existing tenancy. These elements are all contained in more detail in Annex B alongside the York Living rent requirement. And the executive member is asked to approve the policy and strategy document appended as Annex B.
Andrew, you wrote this opus. Do you have anything to add?
That covers it very, very nicely. I suppose just one note on the York Living rent. York Living rent as part of the tenancy is that is designed to sort of maximise investment, sort of financial capacity in new homes, whilst also setting a clear threshold based around local incomes and apologies, sorry.
Sorry, can you just hold for 1 second? We've got something going on literally outside the room. Is it interfering? I'm just going to ask Ollie, our comms guy. So I think we're fine. Sorry, Andrew.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. So the York Living rent is designed to make sensible use of the affordable rent tenure to maximise investment capacity in new build housing, new build social housing, and while setting sort of thresholds around affordability that's based on local incomes and people in essential jobs in the local economy being able to afford those rent levels.
Thank you. And thank you for all the time, effort that you've put into this, and indeed, as we heard from Councillor Fenton, bringing this already to the scrutiny committees. And very grateful we were for their input, which were, I understand, incorporated into some of the recommendations were incorporated into this report. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair. Yeah.
Thank you. So, Pauline, could you just talk a little bit about the types of consultation that this report has gone through? Sorry, I'm smiling because this is incredibly loud, even though you probably can't hear it on your screens.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the three key parts of consultation with this policy has been with the other social housing regulators. Shall we start again?
Yeah.
Regulated social housing providers in the city, with tenants as well, and with the scrutiny committee that councillors referred to earlier. So quite extensive consultation.
So it's both with the sector, well, not both, including the sector, tenants themselves, and members. Thank you. And this overall strategy has a number of policies that feed into it, which you've referenced, I think, in the annex, and that includes things like the prisoner protocol, the domestic violence policy, the antisocial behaviour policy, which will, and what I'm just wanting to make sure is that when we have this on the council's website, that it is in a format in which all the relevant policies that underpin the strategy are easily accessible and follow on, rather than tenants having to look in lots of different places. So can I just make sure that that is that is going to happen? I don't know who you need to talk to in IT, but we need to make this document as accessible as we possibly can. So the recommendations for this now has a number of key elements to it. There's one overriding one, which is on page 519, which is in paragraph 13, which is to approve the tenancy policy and the strategy document appended as Annex B, which I'm happy to do. But then there are also the York Living Rent policy approach to the use of affordable rent in the city. And there are 3 options there. And I'd just like to talk a little bit about that. And Andrew, I'm very grateful for your input. It's incredibly important that when we talk about affordable rent, that we talk about what is affordable within York. We know that the government's definition. So would it help, before I just go on to accept that recommendation, is it for you just to explain how the different definitions of affordable work? Because I know that when I read the local paper, for example, people are saying, oh, well, you talk about affordable, but it's not affordable. And we're trying to address that in this affordable rent paper. So could you just sort of contextualize, I think, or Fiona, contextualize what it is that we're actually trying to do?
Yes, thank you. So yeah, it has become an increasingly sort of complicated landscape in social housing in recent years around a whole different set of 10 years, rent levels, sort of low cost home ownership models. So just going back to that, the sort of traditional social housing, which is still sort of the overwhelming majority of social housing in York, is a social rent. You know, say in the region of £100 to £110 a week often for our council homes. So that's a social rent. In more recent years, an affordable rent tenure was brought in nationally, which is only a minority of social housing, but gives the option to charge rents up to 80% of market rents. Now, of course, in York, that would, potentially be an exceptionally high amount. So that's where we've tried to define it a little bit better, which I'll sort of come on to in a minute on the York living rent. So it's just to say as well, there's other models around shared ownership, which gives people the opportunity to own part of a home alongside paying a sort of a discounted rent level on the remainder, which isn't, within the scope of this particular policy. So with affordable rent, I think we've recognised and looked at national examples elsewhere for other areas that have developed something similar to the living rent approach. I think it's fair to say there isn't really a hard and fast rule that can be applied, because rents by local area can change a lot, local incomes can change. So just setting another arbitrary threshold, well below 80% of market rent, wouldn't necessarily lead to the sort of outcomes that we all need. We're sort of aiming to see around extra affordable housing. So we've linked it into local incomes and the sort of aim of people paying, typically no more than 30 to 35% of the income in affordable rent. And then depending on the sort of the types of property to, the local area, that would typically be anything from around 45% of market rent to 65% of market rent. So it would certainly be a sort of evidence-based scheme by scheme assessment, but this gives some really clear sort of guidelines and principles that not only the council will be following, but that we work with registered provider partners as well to follow, and to make sure that, we as far as possible, we're not intending to see, affordable rents that are sort of, in reality aren't actually affordable to the people in those kind of essential jobs that, that affordable housing is, is sort of designed to benefit and sort of support the local economy. I suppose just say the last thing on that is that the way that the sort of housing benefit and universal credit system works is that social rent and affordable rent do sort of get equivalent treatment in that people that get the maximum sort of benefit entitlement would get the full rent covered, basically, for social rent and affordable rent. So yeah, where you've got you know, for the benefit system sort of supports this kind of approach, as well as it being in tune with the local economy and sort of evidence around local jobs and incomes.
Yeah, thank you. And I think this is an incredibly significant element that that we're applying in York. That, you know, we know that incomes in many cases are relatively low, and we know that rents are relatively high, or in many cases eye-wateringly high. So using a set definition of affordability just would not work for York, and that's why it's incredibly important that we do this exercise and that we take this approach, because we know that when you're spending 50–60% of your disposable income on your rent, that means you've got less money to spend elsewhere. Less money to spend on your children, less money to spend on in the local economy. So I think recommendation is absolutely the right way to go. And so recommendation 1, I accept recommendation 1. The next one is the use of fixed term and flexible tenancies. And that is, it's proposed to be used only in a set of defined criteria that represent exceptional circumstances to balance security of tenure for tenants alongside making best use of social housing stock. And that's important too, because when we offer a new tenancy, and some of the points that Jocelyn made and that we hear regularly, and that we'll be discussing further down in the ASB policy, is that when a tenancy goes wrong, particularly very early on at that stage, the council does have to make some really very difficult decisions. So I'm very happy to accept option 1, and I think those are the only options. Other policies, including the review of the prisoner protocol, we are working on, and that will come to a hopefully either a future decision sessions or an officer delegated decision relatively quickly. Thank you very much for that agenda item. And then we move on to Pauline. Do you want to go to the antisocial, damp and mould, and then do the neighbourhood improvement programme last? Is that okay? Given that we've got Jocelyn and we've got Councillor Wallace still here. So we're going to move, we're going to skip agenda item 11 and move into the agenda item 12, which is the antisocial behaviour policy. And we've got Pauline again, and we've got Fiona Brown, who's the Building Services Change Manager, joining us for this agenda item. Pauline.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd just like to, over the building works outside, just to thank the public speakers for their contributions and involvement in the development of the policy. And if I can just take, just respond on the public comments on the antisocial behaviour policy and the damp and mould policy around not going through to the people scrutiny panel. I do apologise for that, but these are critical health and safety policies which we can't delay in implementing, particularly the damp and mould policy. We will do better in future. We will plan in the scrutinies when we're able to, and if it takes an additional, we'll need to speak to the scrutiny team. If it takes an additional meeting, we might have to do that, but acknowledging that councillor scrutiny hasn't had the input into these two critical health and safety policies, but we did speak to residents and tenants, which is critical too. So thank you for your input to that. I think Councillor Waller also mentioned what about single points of contact for people who've got ASB incidences to report. We do have web pages which point to where people can report incidences if they're live. Obviously, if it's criminal offence, then speak to the police. But we have community safety hub officers that are highlighted within the policy, whose job it is to take forward significant ASB issues that may impact on somebody's tenancy. But prior to that, of course, there's the housing management officers who are working in and around estates, and it is critical as things arise for people to report things through the housing management officers, because they actually deal with the early stages of the ASB process. So, and just to add, I am now responsible for community safety and the housing management teams. So we're hoping to bring them, we're working closer together in future, which I think is a really good move. So just coming back to the policy itself, this report seeks approval of the revised antisocial behaviour policy. So the existing elements of the policy, which existed before, there's very little change to that. However, there are some new and really important sections within the policy that makes it more comprehensive and reflects new responsibilities and ways of working. So there's a new section on domestic abuse and on tackling hate, both of which have new policies. Reference to the good neighbourhood management process, new section on roles and responsibilities. So hopefully that helps identify those people who residents can make contact with. New section on informal and formal remedies. A section on what happens after a tenant has reported ASB, so all the next steps. Updated section on multi-agency working, which is critical to this policy, and we meet with our partners 3 times a week to talk about antisocial behaviour going on in the city. So it's a forefront of our working practice. And we've got an updated section on ASB case review, formerly known as the community trigger. So the executive member is recommended to approve the revised antisocial behaviour policy for council housing.
Fiona, would you like to add anything? Yes. Stole your thunder. I understand, and I've been a councillor for a number of years, not as many years as Councillor Waller, I accept. And antisocial behaviour is something that really does impact on not just the well-being of a victim or a number of victims, but also on how an area feels. And we hear this time and time again, that one or a few individuals can make living in an area feel like almost a depressing place to be. And that's why we have to take a different, more considered approach. Part of that was indeed giving our Director of Housing and Communities the community safety brief, to bring all of those elements of how a community or how an organisation like the council can, and the police and our voluntary sector organisations and our other support services can best work together, because No one organisation has all the answers. You can't police your way out of it. You can't evict your way out of it. The only way that you can do it is by taking a coordinated approach of addressing the issues, identifying the issues, supporting the victims, supporting the perpetrators as well. But when you have to take a decision, and this is where the other major complaint that we all hear is, it takes a very long time and things don't seem to improve for weeks or months on end. And that's because taking action against an individual to remove their home or to take illegal action is not a knee-jerk and can never be a knee-jerk process. That's not to say we don't take your complaint seriously. That's not to say that we're not listening. We're pulling evidence together. We're investigating. We're getting other forms of information together, because when we do take the decision, and when the council takes the decision to take somebody to court, a judge will expect that we have had a very rigorous process before that actually happens. I've been in enough courts professionally, not as a defendant, to know that it's not a process that is taken at all lightly. And so whilst it may be frustrating, and this is a message that I just really want to emphasize, you're not being ignored. We are listening. We are listening to you, and we are taking you seriously. And that's why when Jocelyn says, you know, very often it's the victims that we make that have to flee, particularly in cases of domestic violence, and very often that's the right thing, and that's something that they want. A new start, a new opportunity to be somewhere else. But when a family is settled, you know, we do need to think about the rights of the victims. And I think this policy and the new domestic abuse strategy is very much taking that victim first perspective. So I'm asked to recommend and approve the revised antisocial behaviour policy for council housing in York. It will be amended. These things will be amended. We will adapt. We will learn. But this, I think, is a very good starting point, and I'm very happy to say, you know, this policy is something that the city needs. The additions to it are something that our tenants and our residents need. And I'm very happy to accept the recommendation to adopt this antisocial behaviour policy. So thank you for all your work on this. And we then move on to the equally important issue of damp and mould and the new damp and mould policy. And Pauline, can you talk about why we've introduced a specific damp and mould policy that didn't previously exist? And we all know that there have been some very tragic incidents. So, Pauline.
Thank you, Chair. Hope you can still hear me over the noise outside. As you say, this report seeks approval of a damp and mould policy for the City of York Council's housing stock, so it's specific to us. And just to answer your question, a robust policy is essential to ensure legal compliance with AWAB's law. improving our standards of safety and to protect residents. So where AWAB's law came from is recent incidents of where sadly that there has been there are deaths resulting from damp and mould. So we need to reduce the instance of it, but it's also to save lives, but it's also inherent in the consumer standards, and the basis of the consumer standards for public sector housing, it sits within the Grenfell disaster. And the heart of what all of the recommendations that came out of Grenfell was, one, that we listen to residents and involve residents in everything that we do and respond to their complaints. And where there are complaints, we learn from those complaints. But the other element is having strong health and safety practices, and that includes responding to instances of damp and mould as well as and so our performance systems now make sure that we respond to all of those issues. One, to ensure that we have safe homes, but two, that we listen to the voices of our residents that are telling us where we haven't met those standards as well. So that's the reason behind this report. As the report states, failure to adopt a clear policy could result in non-compliance, which has serious impacts for the authority, increased complaints, potential enforcement action and reputational damage. But reputational damage is almost last on that list because it's about resident safety. Approving this policy will provide a structured framework for consistent practice, accountability and proactive management. So that's about everybody having eyes and ears around these issues. So whoever goes into a resident's home, whether they're doing a repair or a housing management officer or community officer or local area coordinator, that everybody's got their eyes and ears open to health and safety risks. So the decision here is now needed to align with national standards and demonstrate our commitment to tenant welfare. The policy was consulted on with tenants and builds on and consolidates the work and approach that is in place with regards to damp and mould currently. So this includes our repairs policy, which already details our approach to dealing with damp and mould, including a flow chart on how damp and mould cases are managed. The stock conditions survey, so building on that, this is a survey we had done that last year, but we are now finishing that work off because we surveyed 86% of homes. We want to survey the rest. We are capturing the remaining 14% this year, specifically looking for damp and mould issues as a category 1 issue, which is a priority for us to resolve. And where these have been reported as part of the survey, within 24 hours, we've responded to those issues. So that's category 1 hazards. Category 2 hazards were dealt with using planned approach as part of our planned repairs programme. We already have a repairs inspector in place, and the 10-day inspection timescale has been in place since April 2025 in advance of the legal requirement, which was in place. AWAB's law came in place in October 2025. And we have reporting developed to allow tracking of all jobs associated with the initial report of damp and mould to ensure that the matter isn't considered resolved until all associated jobs are closed, and tracking of timescales on these jobs. So you're asked to approve the damp and mould policy, which is explained in much more detail in Annex A. And again, if you've got anything that I've missed there, please can share that.
No, nothing further from me.
I bet you're glad you came now, aren't you? Thank you. And AWAB's law and the tragedy in Rochdale, I think, brought into sharp focus the fact that damp and mould has an effect on people's lives and their healths, and We know that particularly in young people, respiratory problems, and in the elderly, are massively exacerbated by living in a property that's cold and damp. It's one of the reasons why one of our first roles in this administration was to approve a comprehensive stock condition survey of every single one of our council properties. And as you've heard from Pauline, 86% of those have now been done. The ones that haven't been done have mainly because we've not been able to access the actual tenant. It's not that we've not got round to it. And what that has identified has been a number of properties where we may not have heard from the tenant from 1 year to the next, actually needed work doing. And therefore it's been incredibly useful, which is another reason why we invested significantly into improving the budget for building services in advance of AWAB's law being introduced. Councillor Fenton's right, issues of condensation, lack of ventilation, lack of insulation are very much areas that we are focusing on. And in particular, there's been an emphasis on improving roofing and guttering this past year, and will be for certainly the next year, because often it's the communal areas that are the cause of damp problems in an individual property. So particularly in our flattered accommodation. So I think that having a damp and mould policy is great, and I think it's the right thing to have, but we need to make sure, and I think we are doing, and I would like to thank all of the staff, not just in preparing this strategy, but particularly in our building services teams, who've really gone above and beyond this past 12 months to eradicate damp and mould within a very, very tight regulatory time frame. So I'd like to record my thanks to our council staff in building services. So the recommendation, I think, is, just remind me, Pauline, where's the recommendation? Paragraph 7. Well done. Is to approve the damp and mould policy appended as Annex A, which I am very happy to do, and that policy is now approved and adopted, though it was already being applied. So thank you very much indeed. Do you want to go now, or do you want to stay? Oh, you might as well stay. Right, oh, happy days. And so we now move to what I think is a real good news story, which is the Neighbourhood Improvement Programme 25 to 27. Pauline.
Thank you, Chair. And just to respond to Councillor Public Cycle. Yes.
Is that better?
Thank you. So just to respond to councillor comments in the public participation part of the meeting, we do need to get better at the upfront engagement of councillors and public in this programme, but we were conscious that 402,000 was sitting there and we needed to be spending the money to the benefit of the city. And whilst there are some specific areas of expenditure for the Groves and Walmgate proposals, which did appear in previous executive decisions, so they're not new. The rest of the proposals are for citywide benefit. So the procurement of a condition survey of all housing communal areas. And this will inform the expenditure proposed in the budget that will go on from executive this evening onto full council for consideration, which is £1 million of capital expenditure. So that survey will inform that. Recognising that all housing estates have communal areas and they're in different states of condition, so we want to invest in that. There is a £30,000 contribution to an additional van for the community's team environment officers that allows them to work across the areas that we set down in the previous reports on the neighbourhood model, so all 4 areas can be accessed, acknowledging not all 4 areas have the intensity of housing estates, such as the northern area, but the other areas do, so that we can actually get around the city. £40,000 for the neighbourhood caretakers and communities team environment officers. So this is specific HRA funding to supplement, again, another budget proposal to invest in equipment and ability to do the repairs arising from walkabouts. So Councillor Waller mentioned that it's really important that we do something as a result of those walkabouts. So this funding and the other proposed revenue funding will supplement that work very considerably, but this is dedicated to the HRA housing estates. And then there's £40,000 for ad hoc work coming up across the city. So it gives us full flexibility, responding to members and members of the public throughout the year. And then we will engage on next year's 170,000, but we have got a partial equipment commitment in here around the Groves. So we've given them some funding to reignite the Groves improvement plan that was developed before the pandemic. So we are expecting some commitment to go into the Groves. But we do have that new budget coming into play on April the 1st, so we can start that process again. So if I could just start from the beginning, this report presents the Housing Neighbourhood Improvement Programme, affectionately known as NIP, and seeks approval of these housing revenue account funded projects and expenditures as outlined in the report. In line with the approvals in 2 previous reports in June and October last year, the primary focus of the funds will be building community capacity to co-manage shared spaces, support wider estate regeneration work, for example, supporting the Groves Neighbourhood Plan objectives, Walmgate proposals, and supporting the development of neighbourhood plans in other areas, supporting measures to reduce antisocial behaviour, so again, building on the policy, for example, through new lighting, security gates, and the closing off of unsafe passageways, improving communal areas around council houses and apartments, such as improving hard standing areas, tree and shrub planting, and enabling community and resident activity to take place. So the executive member is asked to approve the projects and expenditure as follows. So if you're happy for me to read rather than you to read, Chair.
Yeah, because you didn't print it. It's not in papers. It's all right.
Okay.
Crack on.
So the two areas of specific area support I talked about was the £10,000 initial funding to the Groves Residents Association in relation to the Groves Community Plan, resulting and the resulting proposals to inform future NIP funding proposals. That's a lot of proposals in that sentence. And 250,000 for Warmgate proposals priorities. And we'll be working with residents, but also city development teams in firming those proposals up going forward, and hopefully accessing further funding that will supplement that 250,000. The four citywide projects delegate the procurement of a condition survey of all housing communal areas to myself. We have 32,000 left in this budget to contribute to that. If there's any more funding required, we'd be looking to HRA funding to fund any balance, but we haven't got the quotes in yet for that. So there may be some carry forward if it doesn't cost £32,000. 30,000 contribution for the additional electric van for the communities team environment officers to supplement the existing van that they've got. £40,000 fund for communities team environment officers and neighbourhood caretakers for community involvement equipment and to undertake the repairs arising from walkabouts in addition to the revenue funding that's being proposed in the budget. And finally, £40,000 contingency for off-programme ad hoc proposals delegated to myself in consultation with yourself, Councillor Pavlovich, documented by published officer decisions. And there are a number of recommendations, technical legal ones, that allow us to enter into the relevant procurement processes and grant agreements needed to progress the projects as laid out in them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Kent stayed just because she wants to make sure that that money's coming towards her. Councillor Waller's absolutely right. Tenants want to see improvements in their areas. I respectfully disagree that there have been improvements. I think a lot of our communal areas and our estates have not had the investment that they deserve for a very, very long time. And you only have to walk round them, and Councillor Waller has walked around much of Westfield on a daily basis, I suspect. And I think he would agree with me. So I wanted to move away from just talking about it and paying lip service to improving an area by putting some real heft and some real money behind improving those areas. And he's absolutely right. The residents and councillors have got to be able to have their say as to what they would like to see. The reason that the Warmgate and Groves plans have come forward in this earliest and recordable phase, if you like, is because that process has very much taken place. Councillor Waller will recall, I suspect, that the last administration spent £250,000 on a Groves redevelopment and renovation plan, which was then put on a shelf. I want to see what we can dust off that shelf, and that's why the £10,000 is to work with that community to find ways in which they want to see some investment going in. The scheme in Warmgate has been widely consulted on as part of the Willow House redevelopment, And it absolutely makes sense that when you are embarking on a major new housing development, that you make sure it's that their neighbours also get a significant investment as well. And we've been very fortunate in having drawings and costings done for that. So when we move forward, it will be hopefully in a way that no matter which councillor you are, what party you represent, that you will feel that you have got a say. And not only have we invested what was the HEAP money for 23-24 and 24-25 and 25-26, the 3 years of funding into larger scale and smaller scale projects, but we're also putting an additional £1 million proposed in this budget for this coming year to be spent on improving communal areas. That's 1.54. Oh God, maths. Additional investment into our communal areas, which is, I think, the single biggest investment that our communal areas will have seen, and that's in addition to the investment that's ongoing and increasing for improvement to individual properties. So I'm incredibly excited about this. I think it will be such an improvement for every estate, and what we do in Warmgate and what we will hopefully do in the Groves, we will then do in Westfield and Chapel Fields and Foxwood and Tang Hall. That's the future. You will see a difference. You'll see a difference this year. You'll see a difference in future years. And that's our commitment to our tenants. So on that note, and although I don't have the actual options, whatever the options are, do you want to read them out to me, Pauline, and I'll just agree them?
So just bear with me. So you can either approve or not approve each of the recommendations. So page 658. Page 658.
658. Yeah. Yeah, there we go. No worries. 658. Oh gosh. So I'm asked to approve the approach for engaging members and communities in proposals for spending NIP annual funding. More than happy to do that. And you know, I say this in the spirit in which I hope it's taken, is that I genuinely, and we all genuinely value the contribution of all of our members, because you know your areas, and you can help us in the improvements that we want to make. So I look forward to working with you, Councillor Waller, and your fellow councillors in improvements for Westfield. And then B, to improve the NIP HRA funded projects that Pauline read out earlier, and then to delegate authority to the Director of Housing and Communities in consultation with the Chief Finance Officer and the Director of Governance to commence procurement from the market via an open, fair and transparent competitive process and evaluation criteria in compliance with the Council's contract procedure rules under Appendix A. God, does anybody care? Under Appendix A of the Council's Constitution, and where applicable, the Procurement Act 2023 or the Public Contract Regulations 2015, the condition survey of all housing communal areas, the additional EVAN for the communities team environment officers, and any community involvement equipment for communities team environment officers and community caretakers, and any required repair works arising from walkabouts. Yeah, I think let's spend some money on renaming that. And to determine the provision of any contracts and the provisions of any subsequent modifications and or extensions thereto. And to improve, the council enters into a grant funding agreement with the Groves Residents Association on the terms set out in this report, and basically to work with them, because we don't want to just stick 10 grand into their bank account without supporting them, because they're a hard-working, incredibly diligent residents association, but we do need to support them through the process of working with us. And to delegate authority to the Director of Housing Communities in consultation with the Chief Finance Officer and Director of Governance to determine the provisions of the grant funding agreement and the provisions of any subsequent modifications and or extensions thereto to ensure compliance with the Subsidy Control Act 2022, the Council's financial regulations under Appendix 10A of the Council's Constitution, brackets the Council's financial regs, and the Council's CPRs. Yes, the answers to that. And then E, subject to consultation with the approval of the exec member for executive planning and safe communities to delegate authority to the Director of Housing and Communities in consultation with the Chief Finance Officer and the Director of Governance to commission and determine the provisions of any grant funding agreements and or supply services and or works contracts relating to any off-programme ad hoc proposals and the provisions of any subsequent modifications and or extensions thereto to ensure compliance with the relevant public procurement or subsidy control law, brackets as applicable, and the Council's CPRs and financial regs to be documented by published officer decision. I think I've earned my whatever allowance it is I've got for this job today. Yeah, happy to do that as well. And whoever put that report together, you've done some sterling work. Right, there are no urgent items. So without further ado, after a marathon session, I call this meeting closed. Thank you, everybody.